there's two sets of laws of nature that I have fixated on in my life. The first half of my life, I focused on the laws of thermodynamics, which seemed really unfair to me. You know, like the laws of thermodynamics say that every time we do something, we're dissipating and spreading out and going toward death. And I thought, that's a really bad design. But then I discovered the laws of system dynamics, which are the counterpart to the laws of thermodynamics. Laws of system dynamics say that as we use resources, no, we're not just dissipating and losing capacity, that as we bring resources together, we are spending immediate energy potential, but we are opening up doors to the expression of nature's capabilities that happen when we bring complementary opposites together. And that's what we're beginning to do. And this lovely explanation of what is emerging from an ecosystem, I think, is what is emerging from our system as well. But it takes time to get there. We can't just demand that it happen right away. So right now I would like to bring our recycling crew up and have a conversation pragmatically about recycling and what recycling happens in a circular economy. Now, recycling technologies as we've known them have been mechanistic up until this point. A lot of materials that we bring back in, we are then recycling back into in some cases the same materials that they started out, or we are, as they say, downcycling them into lower grade products that we use in our system. But there's a hungering for going beyond where recycling has gone so far. And the group of stakeholders that we have here are some of the most accomplished in understanding the problems that have come from our inability to recycle certain materials, get plastic past the 8% level of recycling, which we think it's on the verge of a great breakthrough in that arena, and then how we make that happen at a much larger level. So I want to have a conversation with the folks here about the potentials here. Now, Danna Moore, I've known you for
just a little bit.
Just a little bit. I don't know what the heck happens to time, but time I understand is a physical resource. I'm told now, and so
it doesn't really exist.
Yeah, it doesn't really
except
exist.
For this clock right here.
Not the way that we, but it does exist there, and we're going to try to beat that time, by the way, if we can, so that we enrich people's lives more quickly. But Danna, you are the global director of PADI Aware. PADI Aware Foundation. First of all, PADI. For those of you who don't know, is what is it, Danna?
Well, how many scuba divers do we have in the room? Yes.
Okay, you all know what PADI is.
Nice.
Yes.
So, that's great.
And how many certified PADI divers are there on the planet?
Yeah, so PADI is the Professional Association of Diving Instructors. We are a part of the global scuba diving industry, which is about $10 billion globally and climbing. We should be around $20 billion by 2035. And what's great about that is we are a nature-based tourism industry where we actually rely on clean and healthy oceans. For PADI, as about 80% of the market, we represent 28 million recreational divers globally and over 130,000 professionals, but also businesses in local communities that are affected by plastic pollution. So for us, it's really a frontline issue and a business issue. It's ending up in our office.
Yeah. And how many people do you have as volunteers in PADI Aware? PADI Aware is the nonprofit arm of, an outgrowth of PADI, correct?
Yeah, so we're the nonprofit arm, but we kind of act in a symbiotic relationship, just like in the ocean. So we really are the ones that, try to drive action throughout the community. And with the plastic pollution issue, divers are really the first responders. We were really the ones saying, hey, we're seeing a problem here. And then a month would go on, we go, this is a really big problem. Then a year went on, we go, guys, this is bad. And so we were getting calls saying, hey, we're pulling out massive amounts of pollution that we'd never seen before. And so we said, okay, great, pull it out, but can you also report it? So 15 years ago, we asked our divers to report in a standardized way. And that has created the largest underwater citizen science database on the planet. which helps to inform policy.
Indeed. And so you've got divers all over the world that are tracking plastic waste and other waste materials. And what are you discovering in that process?
So I think we've talked a lot about policies, and I think one of the things that we're really trying to do is measure. So how do we measure if a policy is accurate? Mark earlier was talking about plastic bag bans.
Mm-hmm.
What is the implications for that downstream? And so for us, we provide baseline data. So let's just say there was 100 plastic bags here a year ago, now there's 50. That really can show that policies have effects, and we can actually help to track things and trend things over time. So we just provide the underwater eyes, if you will, to an issue that a lot of people don't see unless you are a scuba diver.
Give us some statistics about what is the extent of ocean plastic and ocean waste now. What are we facing?
Well, I think it's important to just talk about what are we finding. So for us, main things we're finding, 61% of all pollution is plastic. Of those, the top 4 are plastic bottles, not a shocking one for folks, plastic bags, plastic wrappers, and then plastic cutlery, which is something we see a lot, especially in tourism markets. So really those are the 4 items that we want to start focusing on as a community. And when we have this conversation, can we, make those a priority as items that we really need to start, addressing from both the global level and the local level.
Now, are there other materials too? I understand there's industrial wastes and so on, industrial materials, fishing nets, things like that. How do we deal with those kinds of problems?
Fishing nets are number 1. That's just hands down the biggest issue that we're seeing. But I think from a packaging...
That's the largest volume source? Yeah.
From a packaging perspective, for us, it's, the majority of the markets that we're in are small island nations, and they just don't have the ability to, really do waste management the way that some of the other countries are. So for us, it's how do we provide them support and ensure that not only are we removing it, but we're helping them to inform the items they have to come to first.
So you're looking at finding solutions, identifying the problem, having your folks track, and then having them measure the impacts of policies as they come into place to deal with the waste plastic.
And also removing the debris. So right now there's a negotiation going on at the global level of how do we have a legally binding plastic treaty. But the one thing that they're talking about is removal. And the only way that right now is a standardized way to remove debris is trawling. Which I think people can understand. If you've ever been in a coral reef or any biodiversity area, you really don't want to trawl it to try to remove the debris. So we actually also provide, a really good mechanism to remove in a way that doesn't hurt the environment.
But prevention, it sounds like, is what we really need to...
Just not getting there in the first place.
We need to stop the plastic from getting there in the first place. And in terms of recycling, methods, are you waiting for the perfect recycling method to... This is like a leading question, isn't it? Are you waiting for the perfect recycling system to come into place before we do anything? Or do you think we should maybe do something, with what we have?
My feeling is that this is a local issue in a lot of ways. These fights are being fought at the local community level that are just these people are inundated. Their entire ecosystem has been inundated with trash. And so for me and I think this goes back to what are we measuring? Why are we measuring it? What's important? Are we measuring carbon impact? Are we measuring pollution? For us, we just don't want to see it in the marine environment. So that's really what matters from a tourism perspective, but also just from an ecological perspective and a human security perspective, because once it enters the marine environment, it comes back in to our food system. So for us, we really, that for us is the North Star of how we're measuring what really is having an informed policy with good impacts.
So keep it out of the environment in the first place. As the number one, and that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be cleaning up what's out there, but
we'd like to not clean.
But if we have to clean everything that's out there, then we've obviously lost.
Yeah, we definitely don't want to be cleaning. And on top of that, from an entangled animal perspective, there's about 1.4 million sea animals that die every year from entanglement or ingestion. Just 20 minutes ago, I had one of our dive centers email me a picture of a turtle with, a plastic wrapped around its neck, and that's the heartstring thing, right? That's like the heart part of this conversation that I think sometimes gets lost. We talk about policies at such a high level, but when you see it underwater, it's a different game. It's a different feeling, especially for people who have seen that turtle every day for 10 years, and then, they show up and it's entangled. So these are the things that really matter.
I want to go to Keefe Harrison, and Keefe is one of the most seasoned practitioners of pro-activism, somebody that got into this movement and immediately saw that there were pragmatic things that needed to happen, and you managed to bring environmentalists and business interests together to actually drive change and to channel the funding that was needed for communities to prevent plastic from getting into the waste stream in the first place. How did you do that, and what's next?
My middle name is Action. So,
no,
the Recycling Partnership's 11 years old, and I started us because I couldn't find a group that was pulling together all the different sectors, and I bet folks in this room have heard of nonprofits who name and shame. Their goal is to identify bad actors and sue them and put them in publicity, and there is a role for that, right? It raises awareness, but I wondered, then what? Then what happens then? So built the partnership to be an insist and assist model. So how do you insist that companies uphold their goals and then assist them, help them by bringing data, transparency, and the best brains. So in 11 years, we've started from an idea, and it was just me on the first day, and now we've got nearly 100 staff across the country, and we've raised almost $500 million that are from corporate entities leveraged on local dollars. We put those grant dollars to work on the ground, and so it's all about we keep us really in the niche of getting stuff done and telling the truth of what recycling can and cannot deliver, and what's a real expectation. So we can dig into that today.
Yeah, and I think that one of the challenging things is, of course, you need to tell your stakeholders on all sides the truth, because it's only by telling them the truth in as gentle and respectful and understanding a way as you can that we can get to solutions. We don't want to fool one side or fool the other side. It's just not going to work for very long. How are you able to do that and raise $500 million? Is that right?
Yeah, over 11 years, it's $500 million with our corporate and then our local commitments. So when we put dollars on the ground to start or expand a recycling program, they've got skin in the game too, right? And so we do it by telling the truth of what's happening. Recycling is a woefully under-dated space. I think that's a real word. And so we set out from the very beginning to bring data to the space. Can people recycle? Do people recycle? And does the system ensure that old stuff turns to new stuff? That's basically what we're talking about. And when we do that, we protect natural resources. None of that really existed. EPA had some stuff, there were guesses. So we got to work, and we've published 3 reports over the past 11 years, the state of residential recycling. And in the beginning, we could only measure the first one, can people recycle? And then the second one we could do, can they and do they? And now we're getting to the point where we can measure the whole supply chain. The hardest part is the end market stuff. Does the old stuff really turn to new? But we're working on it. And so we track, I did this pop quiz in a different session earlier today. Anyone know how many different US recycling programs there are? Pop quiz time.
Ding,
We don't want to know.
Yeah, I want to guess. Anyone have one?
You want to guess?
Yeah, what's your guess?
3,000?
3,000 is a great guess, and the answer is 9,000. 9,000 different U.S. recycling programs, and they all do their own freaking thing. They make their own decisions, what to call it, how to advertise it, how to do it. It's a local service, right? So we measure all that, and we're bringing data. So we work with American Chemistry Council, we work with Dow, we work with the biggest retailers, the biggest producers, material converters, all materials. We work with thousands of communities, and we do it by we've done this all together. Here's the truth. Here's what the data tells us. None of us like what's happening now. But here's the model of what it will really take, and here's what it will cost. Fixing the U.S. system, $17 billion to fix it, $17 billion a year to operate it. Okay, you ready to get to work? So we just tell the truth. And I say the same thing to NGOs, to policymakers, to the press, and I just try to seem pleasant and hope that they'll come along.
Yep. And for the most part, they keep coming back because you have staying power, sustaining. I like that, sustaining power.
Bill just trademarked that.
There you go. So, well, one of the elements of truth that I think I think we need to accept in the recycling community has been that there are limits to what we have called mechanical recycling, the accumulation of certain materials. Aluminum can is a fabulous mechanically recyclable material. 75% of what we've ever used is still in circulation in the economy. My friend Bill Coors was a big part of forcing that to happen in the beverage industry. Paper is another, eminently mechanically recyclable product, and certain types of plastics, HDPE, PET bottles, and so on. But when you get beyond that, you need to be inspired, and some of the best inspiration for recycling comes from nature. We've been studying the different approaches of nature-based recycling, and I want to emphasize what Eric Amiu said earlier about nature-based versus nature-guided and necessarily safe, but nature-based solutions in recycling, biological methods of recycling, chemical methods of recycling. Nature has prescriptions for recycling that she has been applying for billions of years. Pyrolysis, hydrolysis, glycolysis, methanolysis. I'm only beginning to understand these and see these in action. Enzymatic recycling and so on. Companies like L'Oreal, Nestle, PepsiCo, Eastman, Carbon Light are using these materials, and they are how nature does things like regenerative agriculture, using the materials that come from these processes. Now, simply because something is nature-based doesn't mean that it's friendly to nature. That's where nature-guided comes in, because there are certain principles by which we see nature evolving that enables natural systems to carry out natural processes in ways that continuously become safer and cleaner and more life-friendly over time. And this is where we're beginning to get in. I want to begin to explore this area, and Adam Peer, if you can tell us a little bit about what's happening within the American Chemistry Council and within the sector in some of these new areas of chemical recycling, I suppose in particular, and where you see that potential beginning to lead.
Yeah, absolutely. We need all tools on the table, and we need all forms of recycling. And like was being talked about, we need to make those decisions about what we choose in a data-rich environment. Because I've noticed that the more data that you have and the better principles that you have, the better decisions that you make. So it's less principled, it's less us versus them. You're following the data to make the best decisions. Mm-hmm. And there's a group of plastic packaging that's just very, very difficult to recycle. A lot of it's films, flexibles. Think about the chip bags, the candy bar wrappers, things like that. We need a way to recycle those items so they don't end up in our landfills or worse. And some of the technologies that we're able to use to bring that material back into circulation is a family of technologies called advanced recycling. The most prevalent form in the United States is called pyrolysis, and it's a heat-based process which takes those used plastics and can break them back down into base chemicals, into material that can be turned into food packaging and medical packaging, which is sometimes very difficult to put mechanically recycled content into. And by doing this, we get to preserve that material, we get to keep it into circulation, and we get to complement the existing system. Mechanical recycling and advanced recycling both work in tandem. They complement each other. They have different ends and goals. But they're two technologies that really should work together. Mm-hmm. Now, while a lot of the focus has been on plastic packaging and sort of the consumer packaging that you see in the stores and maybe at a convenience store, this technology is incredibly important because we need to keep an eye on the future. We need to better develop things like how we recycle automobiles, textiles, and electronics. And advanced recycling and those different family of technologies are critical to make sure that we're not just recycling our plastic packaging, but recycling other elements like auto, textile, and electronics so that those aren't ending up in our landfills as well too.
Now, I suspect there's huge amounts of plastics that are being used on a global basis. We're at about, is it 8% recycling? Is that about the right number? 8% recycling of plastic. And obviously, if we want to keep plastic out of the oceans, we got to get those numbers way up. It's not going to come for free. It's going to require the kinds of economic incentives. Is the industry, willing to step forward with that? Is there a way to provide that economic incentive so that we actually do draw the vast majority of plastics ultimately out of the waste stream before it ends up in the natural environment?
Yeah, let me tell you exactly about one of the partnerships we're working to do just that. Because while it's important to have national frameworks, things like we support national base minimum recycled content to send that demand signal to spur the investment to bring back.
So you're supporting minimum recycled content, or that's part of the.
Absolutely, that's a critical part of it. And we support things like creating standards and frameworks and all the things that the federal government can do to provide the legal certainty for these technologies. And that's extremely important. But also a part of the picture that's extremely important is that we concentrate on one area of the country where we actually bring that material back into circularity. And one of the projects that we support and are playing a very active role in is with the Recycling Partnership and their CalFlex program, which the goal of that is to bring flexible films into circularity in California with the extended producer responsibility law that was passed out there. And we're getting started even before the law becomes fully
So this is
effective.
brand new. It's got to be brand new because it was, yeah.
And based off the initial data that we've worked with, about a third of those plastics, that film and flexible, needs to be advanced recycling because there is no other home for it. And so the thing that we're doing, the role that we're playing, is we're answering the questions like, what are the economics? How does that material need to move around in the system? And where are ultimately the end markets so that that material comes back into circularity and we can actually point to an area of the country where we say, we've done it, it's working here, and take what we learned from there and apply it to other parts of the country.
Now, I'm sure a lot of people are concerned that we're creating all this vast amount of plastic, and isn't this just going to be a system to continue to create vast amounts of plastic that we don't necessarily need, an unending supply? And how do we know that we're going to be able to even afford to collect all this plastic up? What do you say to folks who have that as a critique or a fear?
Yeah, well, extended producer responsibility captures a lot of those questions and gives value to that material at the end so that it sends the market signal to pull that material back in. And so it interjects the economic questions that you're asking about, how are we going to afford this to be able to pull it back in? Well, when you create that value for that product, then there's value to it that can create the demand that can bring it back into circularity.
So you've got a combination of recycled content mandates, so that you have a draw back into the product. We heard a little bit earlier that sometimes recycled feedstock can be more expensive, but when you have that mandate, got to hit 30%, got to hit 50%, then that drives that demand. And then you're saying there's systems like EPR to provide the financial incentive to essentially shift the cost from the community, the environment, the consumer, the person at the unlucky end of the waste management system, and shift that back to the brand, so that that cost is embedded in the system, and there's an incentive to recycle.
Exactly.
Okay, so that sounds like a great system. It's got to actually work in practice. And as we learned earlier, the laws of thermodynamics don't always allow recycling to pay for itself if we just continuously degrade these materials. So I want to hear from Dow a little bit about what's being done. Nature has this fascinating process of taking materials and with biological and chemical processes, breaking them down into component parts and then putting them back together in forms from which emerge new capabilities. And we're just beginning, I think, to learn how nature does that, and does that in a life-friendly way. Give us a little bit about what's happening in the company Dow, and where you see that process potentially taking us.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Zhang. I'm from Dow. I'm the Global Sustainability Director for Dow's Packaging and Especially Plastic business. So I've been with Dow for about 12 years, and the reason I joined Dow is because the company is truly a leader in the sustainability space. I spent the first 5 years in the U.S. working on reduce the carbon footprint for the company, make a plastic more circular, and then I spent the last 7 years in Asia Pacific. Help the company, help the industry to launch a few strategic partnership to improve a circular economy in Asia Pacific. For example, the Alliance to End Plastic Waste. We also launched the first dedicated investment fund called the Circular Capital's Ocean Fund to invest in recycling in South and Southeast Asia. So Dow is a material science company. We produce plastic, we produce industrial solutions, silicon materials, and today we become a recycler. So last year we acquired a leading mechanical recycling company in the US called the Circulus. And Bill, to your question, whether this is cost effective, I would say, hey, we are making good progress. So within the company, we have a target. We want to commercialize. Here is the commercialize, not just recycle. We want to commercialize 3 million metric ton of circular and renewable solution. So the circular part is come from mechanical recycling and chemical recycling, or you can call it advanced recycling. And then the renewable solution is how can we diversify our feedstock stream. Today we use mainly fossil-based feedstock like naphtha and natural gas. In the future, we want to use more like a biocircular, bio-waste material, like use cooking oil, palm oil residue, and other bio-waste to convert them into virgin quality of a polymer. And we believe we can make it a good business case for this, and we have a target to have additional 500 million EBITDA.
So that, I mean, to me, when I first heard that, I thought that can't be true. How can a major maker of chemicals shift from petrochemicals as your base of supply to these other kinds? Is that a serious commitment? Are there numbers behind that?
It's a very serious commitment because it really make the business a business sense. One is in the society is they're demanding for recycling, recyclability, recycled content, and also there is a regulatory mandate, for example, extended producer responsibility for those sustainable packaging material. There is a lot of advantage for them using the recycled content or recyclable packaging, and also there is a global plastic treaty being negotiated, and Dow is a big supporter. We want to have a global plastic treaty, and we want the treaty to work, and we want the treaty to stimulate the circular economy, encourage innovation, and make a recycling work.
Tell us about Fort Saskatchewan. I'm not even sure what that is, but I have here is one of your projects is Fort Saskatchewan. What is that?
So that's a great question. So I talk a lot about the circular economy. We cannot just achieve a circular economy. We want to achieve a circular economy with a low carbon fashion. This is for the Saskatchewan's project all about. Right now we are building the world's first large scale zero scope 1 and 2 ethylene cracker. So which means in the future, once the plant is online, it will be online in 2028, 2030. Once the plant is online, we can produce a zero carbon footprint or zero or low carbon footprint polyethylene material for the society. And this project alone can decarbonize 25% of Dow's global ethylene capacity. So this is a significant investment. We put $6 billion into this, and this really shows the company's commitment in terms of a low carbon future and a circular economy.
Now, as I understand it, there are various companies that are leading in different elements of advanced recycling and chemical recycling, and there are different approaches that they take. Some have huge industrial facilities and a clear market for it. In the case of Dow, as I understand it, you've adopted more of a partnership approach where you're working with various partners. I see, companies like Mura, Zycle, New Energy Blue, and Procter & Gamble as partners of Dow. Are these all partners that you're working with, and what does that partnership approach mean?
I think the sustainability challenge we're facing is so significant. There's no one company can solve it alone. We really need to partner with others, leverage each other's strengths, each other's expertise. For example, we have this partnership with Mura, and which could bring 600 KT of a circular polymer into our portfolio. We're helping the company to build their first advanced recycling plant. Mm-hmm. And just recently, we announced investment into the company called Cycle to build their first plant in Rotterdam to convert hard to recycle plastic into circular polymer. And the New Energy Blue partnership is focused more on the bio side. So we work with the New Energy Blue. They will convert second generation cellulosic material into ethylene so that we can convert them into polyethylene. And for the joint, the partnership with P&G is a joint development of dissolution technology. So this technology can purify polyethylene plastic waste and purify them to near virgin quality of polymers.
I want to ask folks here to put up your hands if you have any questions to ask. I have one more question or kind of semi-statement to make, but think about the conversation that you want to have, because we're facing challenges here, and we need solutions. I see a hand going up right here. Yes, sir.
So I'm curious. I wonder if it could be a benefit to do an immediate switch, if wherever possible, to biodegradables as an alternative to the plastics. I know, Amazon is using cardboard now instead of plastic for their shipments. Could a switch be made in packaging material that could do the same with keeping things fresh or usable, mm-hmm. but at the same time, when you open the package and you're through, it can go to the landfill and it composts, mm-hmm. or it can go to the compost and compost, rather than being a chemical process that's got to take place. Would that be any kind of a possible short-term intervention?
Or long-term. So.
That's not something we advocate for at the Recycling Partnership, because a degradable additive in a plastic. So if you're talking about like using a paper thing, then that's great. That's going to naturally do that. But a degradable additive to a plastic, okay, yeah, we would not advise adding it to plastic, because then you just make, yeah, exactly, you got it, big stuff to little stuff. So I think I misunderstood your question. So is the question, should we be choosing materials that have a clear, healthy end of life? The answer is yes. And right now there's a field of ambiguity that we're trying to use data to cut through of the truth to get through greenwashing. I think we'll reach a circular economy when, from the very concept of making something, we'll know, does it have an end of life, either compostable or not, or recyclable, or reusable, or not freaking made in the first place, or is it landfill? And then we're really true about a landfill. And once it gets to a landfill, the goal is to entomb it so that nothing breaks down. And so, those become true tombs that we try to prevent any sort of breakdown, because what happens there is methane production in landfills. Landfills are a tremendous producer of methane in our country. So I'll just add that part.
Can I?
Sure.
Oh, you're the scientist.
Oh, no, I'm not a scientist. But hey, I just want to say there's no one-size-fits-all kind of a solution. I understand for certain application, compostable or biodegradable packaging is a good solution. For example, if you go to a canteen, if you go to a sports venue, most of the time the packaging are highly contaminated with food and they're being collected, commingled all together. So compostable is really good solution for that kind of environment. But if we're talking about the switch and the entire packaging market to compostable or biodegradable, I don't know. Do we have any mechanical recycler here in the room? No? Okay. Well, if you ask any mechanical recycler, they hate compostable or biodegradable material, because they cannot tell if this is compostable or if this is recyclable. Mm-hmm. So you may try to solve one problem, but then you just create another problem for other people. And also from thermodynamic perspective, so there's the scientist head. So you spend a lot of energy, you consume, you use material to make something, and then you just compose them, they become carbon dioxide, water, and some soil nutrition, and then all of those energy or the carbon, they just go back to atmosphere, right? What if we can recycle them? We keep the carbon molecule in the society as long as possible. So that's a better circular carbon yield from the efficiency perspective.
And the only thing that I'll add is that when we advocate for both recycling and composting as well. And we do have a group that's working on creating better bio-based principles, because there needs to be more standardization about what we mean by those terms, so that we're being honest and transparent. And I think just about all of our members have a bio-based material group or market that they're working on. So it's something that we're working very hard on.
Yeah, and I would just add on the standardization side, right now they are negotiating, 175 countries are negotiating over a legally binding global plastics treaty. And this is a once in a generation opportunity. So we should all be really excited about that. And I know that there's been a lot of negotiations at the international table around climate and other issues, but the fact that countries are getting together and saying we have to address this problem in and of itself gives us a framework, one, and two, it also allows us to ladder up into those global goals at the national and local level. So one of the things that they're talking about is, how do we, one, reduce the most problematic items? And I think it goes back to that single-use plastic, because we all know that plastic is good in a lot of ways. I mean, scuba divers, we actually couldn't even scuba dive without plastic. So we need it. But we definitely don't need to get off the beach and have single-use cutlery. I mean, this just isn't necessary. So how can we, again, standardize what are the highest items? And I think because this is such a complex problem, we tend to get a little bit disjointed. For us, just follow the highest problematic issues and that we know are entering the marine environment. It's a pollution issue, it's a climate issue, absolutely. But let's start with just not allowing it to enter the environment, because that harms both humans and animals. So if we could just focus as a community on what are the things that we're trying to solve, I think we could help to not only inform policy, but then track in a measurable way. So that's really where I would like to see the treaty go, and where I'd like to see local communities focused.
One of the insights that I'd like to relate, and anybody else with a comment, please raise your hand so that, okay, I will call on you in just a minute, since I already started mine, but then I got two. But there's a tendency in any activist community, I think, to want to come down as hard as possible to mandate an outcome, and that a market mechanism is kind of soft to them. It's like we need to mandate. And there has been a whack-a-mole process over the last couple of generations where when I was a kid, we were whacking this product. It was ban the can. Originally, we were going to ban the can because we wanted to keep glass bottles. Then, we've been banning a different product every year. When we ban a product, very often we're not banning the need for that product or the utility of that product. We're just banning a particular narrow product in a large system that has defined that as a need or a want. And then other substitutes come in that are often worse from an environmental perspective. What we have found over time is that financial incentives work better, more effectively than bans. If you make it a little bit more expensive to be a bad guy than to be a good guy, a lot of people want to be good guys. And so it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much. Now, one of the challenges when I was a young activist is I was trying to push for things like deposits, and early forms of extended producer responsibility. And I was getting nothing but pushback from industry groups like, oh, we can't do that. That's not possible. We'll impose new costs on government, but we're not going to impose new costs on the marketplace. Now there's been this revolution. I mean, it is stunning, frankly. It's stunning and encouraging and enlightening to see that companies in the chemistry sector are actually supporting advanced extended producer responsibility. I walked into a trade group a generation or two ago. Trade group doesn't exist anymore, by the way, this particular one. And the lobbyist took me aside and said, if you continue to push for EPR, I am not going to none of my CEOs are or ever going to work with you again. None
I
of
was
my
with you when that
CEOs.
happened.
I guess he owned his CEOs. I didn't realize. But his trade group ended up going out of business because they were kind of old school. But now we have this stunning thing happening of the groups saying, tax us, put a fee on us so that we can help to solve the problem. Oil companies asking for carbon pricing, another great example of this. We need to take advantage of those opportunities. Sabrina.
So this is a slight shift, but I'm hoping that the right mix of folks up here can help me with this. Methane reclamation from landfills is going really, really well in the U.S. at large scale. It's profitable, it's doable, et cetera, and a lot of large waste companies are handling that. Mm-hmm. At small municipal scale, the problem is it really profitable? But there's a little municipal landfill near me, Jackson County, Green Energy Park, yep, that they're taking that reclaimed methane and they're using it for artists to do blacksmithing, glass blowing, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's really succeeded in being both socioeconomic development and landfill methane recovery, and therefore reducing risk to a stream from overpressuring of the landfill. So do you see what is needed? What's missing for that to just be done everywhere?
So before I started the partnership, back in the day, I worked in the granting office for the North Carolina Solid Waste Division, so worked in landfills and recycling. And I live in Rhode Island now. We have a landfill capture system at our landfill for the state, and Greenville BMW plant in Greenville, South Carolina runs off landfill methane as well. But I would caution us, there was a push a few years ago, maybe 12 years ago now, where just put it in the landfill, we'll make the methane and we'll harvest it. The problem is that best case scenario, you're still losing 40%. You're still, so you do not want to make it to try and capture it because you're only going to get some of it. But I think state statute, so when I was on the EarthX TV session earlier today, I got the question of what should people be doing? And there's never a better time to use the power of your voice as a consumer with the brands you choose, the retailers you buy from, but your policymakers to help pass extended producer responsibility, landfill mitigations. I think this is an important time, but landfills have kind of flown under the methane radar, and I do not think they should be. They're a tremendous producer. So I think this gets to 9,000 different recycling programs, and there's I should know the stat how many different active landfills there are in the country as well, and they're all managed by different entities, some public, some private. But there is an opportunity to have more harmonized pushes at a state level, and we're also working on a federal policy push right now around a tax code to incentivize a more circular economy, and we have strong bipartisan support on that. So use your voice and beat the drum, and I'd like to help you.
Right. I see Joni had a question over here, and any other questions that folks want to relate. I'll be with you next. So,
Thank you so much. This is so helpful to get the facts and figures behind, and I'm inspired by the level of innovation going on, and excited about what you just talked about with the now really making biodegradable materials a key part of your solution, short-term and long-term. And I had mentioned before in the previous panel, we're part of the Earth Law system that helps put governance in your thinking with all members in your business, in your community, to help stimulate more creative thought and results. And I had mentioned I'm part of the Bamboo Foundation, and bamboo can be, I think, a help, perhaps. I'd also heard of someone I know that is doing something remarkable, creating biofuels through water hyacinths. Is that anything you have looked at or would consider? Because they're everywhere and could be turned into your energy.
Yeah, so I was going to say that's a little outside of my area of expertise, because the folks and companies that I work with are much more focused on creating the recycled content out of used plastics. But the thing I'll sort of tie into the earlier discussion about recapturing energy from landfills is that it's extremely important as we craft laws and incentives that if there's process heat, is there process energy, whether it's for landfills or from another process, that companies aren't disincentivized from capturing that to process their own operations. Because it's extremely important that we don't waste that energy. It's already there, it's already been created. Make sure that you're pulling it back, whether it's that process or the process was described in a landfill or any other manufacturing process. It's extremely important how those laws and incentives are created.
Question right here.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Doesn't feel like it's working. Oh, that's a little better. Bill, you mentioned in your young activist days that you were pushing for what we used to call in New Mexico the bottle bill. I was with the New Mexico Public Interest Research Group at UNM. When I got out of the Peace Corps, and it was the thing to do, right? And so in general, that's called container deposit legislation. I think it started in Vermont, Oregon, and then much of the Northeast, got taken, including Rhode Island. Some said they're from there. Maine, New York, maybe Minnesota or something like that. About 10 states, but it was fought tooth and nail everywhere else, whether in the legislature or in referenda, et cetera. And given how first ones were like 50 years ago, given everything that has happened since then and all of this stuff going on right now, is there still a place for something like that, or is it sort of passé?
Yep. There's an active bill in Rhode Island right now, actually. So it hasn't passed yet. And I think Oregon's a great example of it had a bottle bill, the best bottle bill. So the challenge with the bottle bill is that, is that it sucks money from the local governments who are paying to run the rest of the system. So when you pull out the primo materials, the aluminum cans, then everything else is worth less. So there can be an unintended consequence of the local government as they really eat it, right? So you might get a higher participation rate, you get more material back, good, but the cost to the running it is hard. Where we see and what we're advocating for is there are places for deposit legislation, bottle bills nested with extended producer responsibility. EPR says, company, if you're going to make something and sell it here, then you have to pay to get it back. And if your material is already highly recyclable, you're going to pay just a little bit to get it back. If you have a low recycling rate and it's a really challenging material, you're going to pay a lot more to get the system working. So I would say Oregon is a great example of a nested EPR and DRS bottle bill working in the best way possible. So I would put that as top class.
Definitely. I will just say as a long-term enthusiast for deposit laws that yes, there's absolutely a place for them. And those kinds of financial incentives are what drive very high levels of recycling and of pure good recycled product. But we shouldn't be looking at them as religious masterpieces that can never be improved upon. In California, when we advanced the bottle bill, we were able to do it only because we recognized. First of all, we were beaten. The industry had us beaten in California, and so we had to be innovative. And we created a bottle bill model that took the containers outside the stores, that integrated them into the broader waste management system so that then communities would benefit from recycling in California as well, that served as a model for the Oregon improvement, which emulated California. So California copied Oregon, Oregon then copied California, improved on it in certain respects, and others are doing the same. These economic incentives help to get us to a higher level of quality product for recycling than we have ever been able to accomplish otherwise. But if we demanded the perfect before we accepted anything, we never would have ended up anywhere because there is no perfect system. It all changes, it changes as everything else around us changes. We have to be willing to learn and adapt as we go. Danna.
Well, and I would just add to that, Bill, I actually think the biggest thing that we can do now is share. So just like the expertise here, and Han, you were talking about being in Southeast Asia, and these communities, they don't know what to do. They just don't have the deep expertise that we're seeing here, and I think the many decades of fighting that maybe we've had. And so, how can we step up as collaborators, as a part of One Earth, right? Because this is a global problem, to be able to learn from each other, and also to be able to provide, some of the lessons that we learned the hard way. Maybe without having to have 50 years later. So that's what I think Dow is doing that, American Chemistry Council and Keefe. I mean, there's so much that we can share, and vice versa, right? I mean, they have systems that I think we can learn from as well. And for me, that's really where I'd like to see this industry move, and everybody in this room as well.
Adam?
Yeah, let me make one last shameless plug, because there's two of us here that are graduating next month from the Harvard Extension School's sustainability program, Julie and I. And so you'll see her thesis tomorrow.
Yeah,
right now, a liberal arts education has never been more important, because it teaches you the critical evaluation skills, the communication, how to take a project, research it, be data-driven, and all those things. And so I encourage you all, if you have ever thought about graduate school, this is the perfect time to do it. And if you know somebody in your life that really wants to get active, that program and a whole lot of other programs are the perfect way to equip you with the tools and the knowledge to go out and make a difference and actually bring all this about.
Yeah. Now, one of the most frightening things that can happen to someone is for a pessimist to become optimistic, because you're like, oh my gosh, now I'm not worried as much as I was before. Am I not going to work as hard? And I hope that this discussion has, A, led you to be more optimistic than perhaps you have been before, because the solutions are out there, but B, to recognize that we're not out of the woods yet. We have these solutions, and nature is implying to us, nature is suggesting, pushing us along toward these solutions, but they're not in place yet. We're still destroying oceans at a rapid rate. Our coral reefs are in terrible decline. Our forests, they are still challenged. We have lots of sustainable forestry practices that we've expanded, but it's difficult. We have a thriving trafficking industry globally that traffics in everything that we try to stop from happening. It's $1 trillion or more. There's a lot of challenges that we have in front of us, but it's very hard to find the demons. They aren't easily categorized by, here's the demon, category over here, and here's the hero category over here. We are in a system, a very complex system, and as we learn to be a part of that system and thrive within that system, as we learn to apply the principles that we see in nature, the principles like diversification and variation and complexity and feedback and adaptation, evolutionary change. As we learn to apply those principles, we will become more like nature. We will realize that we are a part of nature. We can let go a little bit of the stress that comes with being the species that decided that it controls it all. And we can become part of this larger ecosystem that we're a part of. That's what we're going to discuss tomorrow as we go into the second half of our circular economy discussion, and as we also explore areas of pro-activism for a circular economy, and then get into some interesting, let's just say gender dynamics that are all part of this. So I want to thank my panel this afternoon. Thank all of you for staying with us through the afternoon. And we're going to see you at the reception.